Tim Cook, from doubted replacement to great goalkeeper of Apple empire. iPhone 17 Air is beautiful, but is there any risk? Part 1. Opening hook. From the shadow of Steve Jobs to the rise of Tim Cook. When people think of Apple, one image has long dominated their imagination. Steve Jobs. The man in the black turtleneck, blue Levi's jeans, and New Balance sneakers was more than a CEO. He was a cultural icon. The architect of the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, and iTunes products that reshaped human behavior, redefined entire industries, and turned Apple from the brink of bankruptcy into a symbol of global innovation. Yet, behind Jobs' dazzling presence, there was always another figure quieter, steadier, and less known to the public. At first, many dismissed him as nothing more than a placeholder, a shadow of the visionary. That man was Tim Cook. On the 24th of August 2011, Steve Jobs officially resigned as Apple CEO due to health concerns. The announcement sent shockwaves far beyond Silicon Valley. For Apple, it was more than a leadership change. It was a moment of existential doubt. Who could possibly replace Jobs? Who had the vision, the charisma, the creative fire to lead Apple into the next era? The board's answer was startling to many. Tim Cook, a man without the showman's flair. A man rarely in the spotlight. A man defined not by grand theatrical gestures, but by spreadsheets, supply chains, and quiet discipline. The skepticism was immediate and relentless. Headlines across the world echoed the same question. Could Cook maintain the level of innovation Jobs had embedded into Apple's DNA? Would Apple lose its edge, its soul, and slowly fade into mediocrity like so many tech giants before it? Wall Street analysts predicted a decline, while die-hard Apple fans feared the magic of the iPhone was a one-time lightning strike that would never come again. In those first few months as CEO, Cook faced immense pressure. It came from shareholders, the press, and even within Apple itself. Employees had grown used to Jobs' fiery leadership, his dramatic product unveilings, his perfectionist outbursts, his relentless push for insanely great ideas. Cook was the opposite, calm, pragmatic, almost methodical. He managed not with passion speeches, but with data, not by demanding the impossible overnight, but by creating a system where excellence was scalable. Cook's philosophy was clear. Apple didn't need to be the first, but it had to be the best. And slowly, the so-called placeholder began to prove that sometimes quiet leadership carries the deepest power. Under Tim Cook, Apple didn't just survive, it thrived. Within a decade, Apple became the first company in history to reach a $1 trillion market capitalization, then $2 trillion, and by 2022, it crossed $3 trillion. Cook expanded Apple beyond Jobs' original creations, launching the Apple Watch, AirPods, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, and building a service ecosystem that delivered consistent, recurring revenue. Even more strikingly, Cook shifted Apple's identity. He positioned the company not only as a technology leader, but also as a champion of privacy, sustainability, and ethical responsibility. He transformed Apple into what some call the benevolent giant, a brand not only admired for its products, but respected for its values. And then came 2025. Apple unveiled the iPhone 17, a moment that once again ignited global debate. Marketed as the thinnest smartphone ever, the Air of the iPhone line, it featured nano-luminous display technology and a revolutionary battery capable of lasting nearly twice as long as its predecessor, the iPhone 16. Admirers hailed it as a leap forward, while critics questioned its durability, worried that the ultra-thin design made it fragile. And, as always with Apple, the price tag became a lightning rod for controversy. Yet regardless of the critiques, the iPhone 17 launch cemented something undeniable. Tim Cook had not merely preserved Jobs' legacy, he had created his own. Apple was no longer the dream of one man. It was an empire of global scale, run with precision and vision under Cook's watch. If Steve Jobs will forever be remembered as the dreamer who set the world on fire, Tim Cook stands as the great replacement, the man who took that flame and built a furnace strong enough to power the future. Sometimes history teaches us a paradox. It is not the founder, but the successor, who proves to be the greatest of them all. Part 2. Roots of a Giant. Family, childhood, and the early years of Tim Cook. To understand why Tim Cook could rise to become one of the greatest leaders in Apple's history, we must travel back to a time long before Silicon Valley, long before he ever dreamed of succeeding Steve Jobs. He was once just a boy growing up in a small southern town in America. Timothy Donald Cook was born on the 1st of November 1960 in the small town of Robertsdale, Alabama. It was a quiet community where traditional values, hard work, discipline, and loyalty were deeply rooted. Cook's family was neither wealthy nor impoverished, but modest and hardworking. His father, Donald Cook, worked at a shipyard, spending long days in the heavy industry. His mother, Geraldine Cook, was a pharmacy worker. From the very beginning, Tim was surrounded by an environment that valued diligence and integrity principles that would shape his entire career. His childhood was not marked by dramatic tragedy, but by patience and steady growth. As the middle child of three, Tim quickly learned to share, compromise, and stand firm when needed. Neighbors and teachers often described him as quiet, reserved, and deeply focused, someone who rarely sought attention but always delivered results. In school, Cook wasn't considered a child prodigy, but he consistently ranked among the most dedicated students. He developed a particular love for math and science disciplines that demanded logic, precision, and persistence. One teacher recalled how Cook often finished assignments early and then spent time helping classmates with challenging problems. This persistence and analytical mindset would later become the foundation of his career in supply chain management, a critical piece of Apple's eventual success. But one experience from his youth left an indelible mark. Growing up in Alabama during the height of racial segregation and civil rights struggles, Cook witnessed inequality firsthand. On one occasion, while accompanying his father to a hospital, he saw the stark differences in treatment between white and black patients. Though he was not directly affected as a white teenager, the injustice infuriated him. It planted in him a deep commitment to fairness and inclusion, values that would resurface decades later when he became one of the most outspoken advocates for diversity and equality in corporate America. After graduating from high school, Cook enrolled at Auburn University to study industrial engineering. This decision was pivotal. At Auburn, Cook not only mastered the science of systems management and efficiency, but also encountered personal computers for the first time. He was captivated by their power and potential to transform industries. It was then that Cook realized technology would be his life's work. Cook graduated in 1982 with a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering, but his hunger for knowledge drove him further. He pursued an MBA at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. There, he was named a Fuqua Scholar, a distinction reserved for students at the very top of their class. At Duke, Cook sharpened his skills in economics, decision-making, and leadership under pressure skills that would later prove vital as Apple's CEO. Before joining Apple, Cook built a strong foundation at several major corporations. At IBM, he worked in manufacturing and logistics, where he quickly gained recognition for improving operational efficiency. Later, at Intelligent Electronics, he became director of operations for the reseller division, excelling in logistics management. Finally, at Compaq, he served as vice president of corporate materials, overseeing global supply chain operations. By then, Cook was seen as one of the brightest minds in the field. And yet, after just 6 months at Compaq, Cook made a choice that shocked his colleagues. He left one of the most powerful PC companies in the world to join a struggling Apple, a company then on the brink of collapse, plagued by losses and uncertainty. Many thought he was reckless, even foolish. But Cook believed in Steve Jobs' vision and saw an opportunity to help rebuild Apple from the ground up. That bold leap of faith would change his life forever. Looking back, Cook's early years forged 3 defining traits: unshakable discipline, a moral compass centered on justice, and the courage to follow his convictions even when the world doubted him. These qualities did not just make him an exceptional manager, they made him the great replacement, the man strong enough to occupy the chair once held by Steve Jobs. Part 3. The Climb to Power. Tim Cook's rise inside Apple and his peak of influence. When Tim Cook left Compaq to join Apple in 1998, the decision baffled many in the tech industry. At the time, Compaq was one of the largest computer manufacturers in the world, while Apple was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. Revenue was plunging, the company's image was fading, and investors had all but lost faith. But Cook saw something that others couldn't: an opportunity to rewrite the fate of a company many thought was doomed. From his very first days at Apple, Cook made a strong impression on Steve Jobs. He wasn't the one inventing iconic products, but he was the man who made sure the ship didn't sink. Jobs was the visionary, the dreamer, the perfectionist, but what Apple desperately needed was someone who could turn those dreams into reality, someone who could fix operations, slash inefficiencies, and stabilize finances. Cook was that missing piece. Cook's first bold move was to overhaul Apple's supply chain. When he arrived, Apple owned and operated several factories and warehouses, burdened with enormous costs and inefficiencies. Cook made a radical decision: shut down most of Apple's factories and shift production to external partners, particularly in Asia. This streamlined model reduced costs, sped up manufacturing, and made Apple's operations far more adaptable to market demand. Within just a few years, thanks to Cook's strategies, Apple reduced its inventory from months to mere days, an unheard of achievement in the tech industry. This efficiency allowed Apple to roll out products like the iMac, iPod, and later the iPhone to millions of customers worldwide at unprecedented speed. Throughout the 2000s, Cook became Steve Jobs' indispensable right hand. If Jobs was Apple's soul of creativity, Cook was its operational brain. The two men could not have been more different. Jobs was fiery, demanding, and often explosive, while Cook was calm, disciplined, and methodical. And yet, their partnership created balance. Jobs pushed for revolutionary ideas, and Cook made sure the system could sustain them. Jobs' trust in Cook was proven during times of crisis. Starting in 2004, as Jobs battled pancreatic cancer, Cook repeatedly stepped in as interim CEO. Each time, he kept Apple steady. Employees kept working, shareholders remained confident, and the company never faltered. These seamless transitions cemented Cook's reputation as the natural successor when Jobs finally stepped down in 2011. Taking over as CEO, Cook understood he was stepping into a seat the world thought was irreplaceable. Unlike Jobs, he lacked the charisma and showmanship that captivated audiences at Apple's legendary product launches. But Cook brought something else: the ability to run Apple as a global machine, highly efficient, relentlessly profitable, and strategically positioned for the long term. Under his leadership, Apple reached milestones that stunned the world. The iPhone continued its reign as the most successful consumer product in history. Apple Watch, launched in 2015, quickly became the best-selling smartwatch on the planet. AirPods transformed the way people consume music and communication. Meanwhile, services like Apple Music, Apple Pay, iCloud, and Apple TV Plus created new revenue streams, reducing Apple's reliance on iPhone sales alone. Perhaps Cook's most defining achievement was leading Apple to become the first company in history to hit a $1 trillion market cap in 2018, then $2 trillion in 2020, and finally surpassing $3 trillion in 2022. These weren't just financial records, they were proof that Apple under Cook wasn't surviving on Jobs' legacy. It was thriving under a new strategic vision. By this time, the media no longer described Tim Cook as the replacement. He had emerged as a new kind of icon, not a visionary inventor, but a disciplined, steady leader who expanded Apple's empire beyond imagination. Cook's climb to power showed the world a powerful truth. Sometimes, to be great, you don't need to imitate your predecessor. You only need to be yourself and do it better than anyone else. Fame always comes with a price. And for Tim Cook, the CEO seat at Apple was not only a crown of success, but also a burden of unimaginable weight. If his reward was transforming Apple into the most valuable company in the world, then the cost was isolation, relentless pressure, and unending waves of criticism. From the earliest years after Steve Jobs' passing, Cook's every move was scrutinized by the press and investors. The comparisons were constant and unforgiving. Analysts and journalists contrasted him with Jobs, his product launches, his leadership style, his lack of theatrical charisma. Articles branded him the caretaker, a manager, not a visionary. Some even predicted that under Cook, Apple would slide into decline. That pressure was crushing, but Cook never responded with outbursts or showmanship. Instead, he let results speak. Yet, that stoic patience carried its own cost. Cook's personal life shrank to almost nothing. Known for arriving at the office at 4 a.m. and often leaving last, he built a life consumed by Apple. Former colleagues have said that Cook sacrificed almost every semblance of a private life to keep Apple's empire running flawlessly. With success also came controversy. Apple's immense profits attracted lawsuits, investigations, and political backlash. In 2016, the European Commission ordered Apple to pay $14.5 billion in back taxes, claiming illegal tax benefits in Ireland. Cook fired back, calling the decision political crap. But the episode dented Apple's reputation as a clean empire. Meanwhile, labor conditions in Apple's overseas supply chains drew global condemnation. Reports surfaced about low wages, excessive overtime, and poor safety at partner factories in China. Although Cook pledged reforms and stricter oversight, critics accused Apple of profiting off exploitation. The image of Apple as a socially responsible giant clashed with these damning allegations. Not every product decision under Cook won applause either. The iPhone 6's Bandgate scandal embarrassed Apple, and the iPhone X was lambasted for its sky-high price. Customers mocked Apple for selling chargers separately and for removing the traditional headphone jack. These bold business choices boosted profits, but made Cook a lightning rod for consumer frustration. In a broader sense, Cook treats Apple as his family. He has cultivated a corporate culture centered on diversity and inclusion. Under his leadership, Apple has become a pioneer in promoting women, people of color, and LGBTQ+ individuals into leadership roles. This reflects not just his personal beliefs, but also a cornerstone of the legacy he hopes to leave behind. Cook accepted that cost, stating, "If hearing that the CEO of Apple is gay can help someone struggling to accept who they are or bring comfort to anyone who feels alone, it's worth the trade-off." All of these storms shaped a dual image of Tim Cook. On one hand, he was celebrated as a masterful leader who made Apple a trillion-dollar empire. On the other, he was portrayed as a cold giant, profit-driven, lacking Jobs' creative fire, and haunted by comparisons to his predecessor. The true price of fame, however, may not have been the lawsuits or the headlines, but the loneliness. In the rare interview, Cook admitted, "Steve was the only person I could talk to about the weight of this job. After he died, I lost that sounding board." That confession revealed the deepest truth. To become the great replacement, Cook sacrificed his peace, his privacy, and perhaps even companionship, so that Apple's destiny would rest firmly on his shoulders. Part 5. Family, Legacy, and the Next Generation. The question of succession looms large. When Jobs departed, Cook was the obvious choice. But when Cook eventually steps down, there's no clear heir. He has never publicly named the successor, but names like Jeff Williams, Apple COO, often seen as Cook's clone, and Deirdre O'Brien, Senior VP of Retail and People, are often discussed. Analysts speculate Cook is quietly preparing the next generation of leaders. But unlike Jobs, he has avoided making a dramatic declaration of succession. Cook's roots in Robertsdale, Alabama, remain an anchor in his life. Despite his global responsibilities, he has maintained strong ties with his mother and siblings. He has often said that this modest upbringing helped him stay grounded, even while leading the world's most valuable company. On the personal front, Cook has pledged to donate most of his fortune to charity. He has made clear he doesn't intend to build a family dynasty of wealth. Instead, much of his fortune will go to causes in education, human rights, and social progress, making him one of the rare CEOs whose post-success legacy is more philanthropic than dynastic. Cook himself has downplayed the idea of a personal legacy. In a speech at Auburn University, his alma mater, he said, "Legacy is not something I think about for myself. Legacy is what Apple leaves for the world. Products that change lives, values that inspire, and the responsibility to care for the planet." Now in his 60s, Cook shows little sign of slowing down. Yet questions about Apple's future after him grow louder. He may not have children to carry on his name, but the culture, vision, and values he has embedded in Apple may serve as his true next generation. In a way, the absence of a family heir makes his legacy even more unique. While many billionaires are remembered through dynasties and descendants, Cook's imprint will be remembered in a global technology empire, an inheritance not for one family, but for the world. Part 6. The legacy they leave behind. Tim Cook's enduring impact. A person's legacy is not measured only by what they own, but by what they leave behind for future generations. For Tim Cook, that legacy does not lie in personal wealth or a family dynasty. It lies in a technological empire that has reshaped the world. 1. A greater Apple than ever before. When Steve Jobs passed away, many believed Apple's golden era would fade. Yet, under Tim Cook, Apple not only preserved its strength but reached unprecedented heights. A market valuation surpassing $3 trillion was not just a record. It was proof of his sustainable, disciplined leadership. Cook transformed Apple into a global machine where creativity is fused with efficiency and stability. 2. Revolutionizing the services industry. If Jobs laid the foundation with the iPhone, Cook expanded Apple into a full ecosystem. From Apple Music and Apple TV Plus to iCloud and Apple Pay, he turned Apple from a hardware company into a services powerhouse. These new revenue streams provided stability and reduced Apple's reliance on a single product. 3. A symbol of social responsibility. Cook's legacy extends far beyond technology. He positioned Apple as a leader in privacy, renewable energy, and human rights. By publicly coming out as gay, he became a symbol of courage and inclusivity in corporate leadership. His strong commitments to the environment, such as Apple's pledge to become carbon neutral by 2030, set a standard for the entire industry. 4. A new model of leadership. Unlike explosive visionaries such as Jobs or Elon Musk, Cook embodied calm, disciplined leadership. He proved that a CEO doesn't have to invent everything but must ensure the company thrives and endures. This quiet strength redefined what leadership in the tech world could look like. 5. A legacy for the next generation. Though Cook has no children, he has planted a culture within Apple that future leaders can inherit. From prioritizing diversity and inclusion to embedding transparency and social responsibility, he ensured Apple's values would live on beyond his tenure. His greatest legacy may not be a successor, but a system of values designed to endure. 6. Public and historical perception. In the decades to come, Tim Cook may not be remembered with the same dramatic flair as Steve Jobs, but he will be remembered as the great replacement, the man who transformed a vulnerable company into a fortress of innovation and resilience. To economic historians, Cook will stand as proof that managers, not just inventors, can make history. Tim Cook may not have created Apple's dream, but he ensured it became a lasting reality. And perhaps that is the ultimate form of power, leaving a mark not only on one era, but on generations to come. Part 7. The final word, conclusion, lessons, and a message to the world. Looking back on the life and career of Tim Cook, debates will always remain. Was he creative enough to stand beside Steve Jobs? Was Apple under his leadership still a symbol of revolution? Or had it become simply a profit-making machine? Yet one truth cannot be denied. Tim Cook proved that greatness is not always about inventing a dream, but about turning that dream into a lasting reality. Under Cook's stewardship, Apple not only preserved the glow of Jobs' legacy, but soared to new, unimaginable heights. He made Apple the most valuable company on earth, expanded its ecosystem beyond the iPhone, and laid the foundation for a corporate culture rooted in diversity, responsibility, and sustainability. These are achievements no critic can erase. But Cook's story is not just one of triumph. It is also a story of endurance, faith, and the price of glory. He lived in the shadow of Jobs, endured endless comparisons, and faced relentless criticism from the media, shareholders, and consumers. For the financial records and milestones, he paid with solitude, personal sacrifice, and the crushing weight of responsibility. The first lesson from Cook's life is this: you don't need to be a creative genius to be great. A leader doesn't have to invent. They must guide, organize, and sustain. In a world where the spotlight often shines on dreamers and disruptors, Cook reminds us that sometimes it is the quiet ones who truly shape history. The second lesson is the power of conviction. Leaving Compaq for a struggling Apple was once called reckless, but Cook showed that having the courage to defy the crowd can open the door to greatness. Strong conviction, combined with patience, can turn the impossible into reality. The third lesson, The Hidden Cost of Glory. To reach the summit, Cook gave up much of his private life. He lived for the company, rarely allowing his personal world into public view. His sacrifice is a reminder that behind every triumph lies a quiet toll, unseen by the public eye. And finally, Cook demonstrates that legacy is not always measured by inventions or individual brilliance, but by the values left behind for future generations. For him, that legacy is an apple that is stronger, more humane, and more responsible. He may never be remembered as a creative genius that Jobs was, but history will always call him the great replacement, the man who kept the Apple dream burning and carried it higher than anyone imagined possible. If Steve Jobs' story was a ballad of explosive creativity, then Tim Cook's is an anthem of endurance and permanence. Together, they form the two halves of Apple's immortality.